Welcome back to another episode of Profitable Publishing. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 ways that you can sell your book outside of Amazon. Now, I know that for most self-published or indie authors, that Amazon seems like the thing that makes or breaks you when it comes to getting your book in front of your audience. And don't get me wrong, Amazon has lots of reach. They reach millions of readers across the world. It's a good platform to have your book on. However, focusing all your efforts in that one platform is not always the best case. And so today we're going to talk about 3 other ways you can sell your book to your audience without having to rely solely on that platform. I'm Ashley. I'm a book marketing strategist, self-publishing consultant, and author myself. I support coaches, consultants, speakers, and service providers to package their expertise into a profitable book that builds their brands. Before we get into the 3 ways of how you can sell your book outside of Amazon, and I say Amazon, but really outside of Ingram Spark, outside of major retailers. These are ways that you can use that are not dependent on one-on-one sales. And so this is important because you never want to put all your eggs in one basket. You don't want it to be where you're solely relying on individual sales to drip in and trying to only convert individual people. You want to have other options that are outside of that. You also want to remember that your book is more than just your physical book. It's more than just what's between the pages. It's something that is an asset for your business that can help you to produce additional forms of income. It's something that really elevates your authority and really helps you to stand out on any platform. And so don't just think of it in terms of book sales or bestseller status, which I actually talk about more in episode 6 of the podcast, because sometimes you really have to consider that bestseller status is overrated. And so I dig into the reasons why in that episode. So be sure to take a listen there. But one part I want to pull from that is that bestseller status doesn't always equate to selling a lot of books. You could be a bestseller and only have sold 10 books in a category. You could be a bestseller and have sold 6,000 books in a category. It depends. And so there's a lot of variance. And another thing to remember is that your book is something that captures your intellectual property and it puts it in a digestible form for someone to be able to interact with at their own pace. And when you structure your book, when you write your book in a way that is accessible to folks, that incorporates different stories, different elements, that helps them to really understand and say, oh, okay, I get it. Like, this is something I can see myself doing, or this person really has a grasp on this content or this concept, and that's something that can help me to be able to get my result, get my transformation, to achieve whatever goal I'm wanting to do. When you think about it like that, then that opens up your book to more than just being something that people physically buy to read cover to cover or to listen to in an audio format. So keeping an open mind in that will actually help you to expand the different ways that people can consume the content from your book, because it's not just the book, it's the concepts, it's your framework, it's the structure you've provided to be able to help people. So just wanted to do a little reframe there. And then also when you think about, okay, if you're selling things outside of your book or you're selling things that are packaged with your book, it helps you to be able to generate additional income that you can then use to support your current book or your future books. So I actually interviewed author Paula Banks in last week's episode 27, about how she was able to use her pre-orders from one book to cover the editing of the next book. And then for her, that was really groundbreaking, because being able to basically bankroll your own books gives you a lot more opportunities and a lot more options, whether it's pre-orders or beyond. When you have that income, you're able to do things like hire a virtual assistant. You are able to help folks in a broader way. You're able to hire a cover designer, get author copies. All these different elements help you to be able to better serve your audience and also take the weight off of yourself. And so that's why it's important to think about ways to sell your book outside of just individual platforms like bookstores, Amazon, things like that. And so the first way that I want to talk about to sell your book off of specifically Amazon is to create an experience with your book. Now, this could be done either through your pre-order period or beyond. It could be something that could be a launch that you do to revitalize your book and bring more attention to it. It could be a part of your existing pre-order. The options are really limitless. And so this could look like having a live event and inviting people to join you and including your book as a part of the ticket, or including it in some other way as a part of the experience. It could be in person, it could be virtual. Those are really going to depend on your audience and the type of experience that you want to create with your people. This could include you reading excerpts from the book and actually doing some of the work that is included in the book your workbook, and really giving people a way to work through whatever the strategy is or whatever the portion of the framework is that you are doing. People, of course, are going to read your book. However, it's a different level when they're able to experience doing that work with you. It helps them to get kind of like a taste of what it might be like to work with you one-on-one or work with you in an ongoing setting, like a group coaching program. And so having an event is a way to bring someone a little closer to you. I think about it like in a teacher aspect of when I taught elementary school, I'd have students that were working individually, students that were working in groups, and then I'd have students that were working with me who might need some one-on-one attention or even in a group with me. And so doing an event can actually help you to help them to implement some of those strategies and to get better results. As well, that's a great opportunity to get testimonials because someone is able to experience you live and in person, if it's in person, or live and virtually, and they're going to have stronger takeaways. They're going to have better understandings, deeper understandings of whatever the thing is that you're trying to teach them because they've been able to do the work alongside you, or you've been able to give them feedback while they're doing the work. So something to keep in mind when you are creating experiences with your book is that you want to make sure it closely ties to the result that your book is providing. If you're trying to tie your book into it where you are increasing book sales, so maybe you're including your book as a part of their event ticket or as an upsell for a different type of bundle, you want to make sure it's consistent and congruent because it would be something where they're not going to get the same result that you have designed for them to if it's not closely connected. So keep that in mind. Now, here's an example. When you think about Bridgerton, and I don't personally watch the show, but I know a lot of people do. So, whenever Bridgerton was first coming out, people would host Bridgerton watch parties. And so they would like get dressed up in whatever century it's set in, and they would have food that's from the time period, and they would basically go all out. And so, if Bridgerton were a book, it would be very easy to package that book with an event experience. And that's something you can do whether you are writing fiction or nonfiction. And so I had a client that did this with her first book. Her name is Dr. Tashawn Creswell. I actually mentioned her in my book, Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders, where she actually hosted a Grown and Sexy book launch at a lounge. And with the event, people were able to also get a copy of the book. So it was included in the price of the ticket. She had a signature beverage that people could partake in. And then she also had a DJ to really just make it like a vibe. And so for her, she was able to sell $1,700 in event tickets for people to get the book and their ticket together to come to the event. And then she also was able to do another $1,000 in just books on her site as well, all during her pre-order period. So she was then also able to get great footage because people came, they had copies of her book, and they paid to be there. And so it was just a great experience all around. And for her, I will say that hers was slightly different from what I just was saying earlier, in the sense that for her audience, because it was a children's book, she obviously did not invite kids to this event, but she made it so that it was comfortable for the people who would be buying the book for their kids, their grandkids, their nieces, their nephews, things like that. There is a way to structure it in the event that your audience who's reading the book might not actually be the people who are buying the book, because sometimes your audience might vary. So the next way you can sell your book outside of Amazon is to sell your book in bulk. And with this, I want you to think about like stores like Costco, Sam's Club, where they sell just not one or two of something, but you get a big like 24 pack, or you get like a case of water that's like almost double the size of other cases of water. And they're selling it in a larger quantity. You can do the same thing with your book. Now, typically you're probably thinking about, okay, I need to try to get X number of individuals to buy X number of books. So maybe you're thinking, I need to sell 1,000 books. That means I need to find 1,000 customers. And that's just not the case with bulk book orders. You could be selling 1,000 books to one customer. And that customer is typically going to be someone who is the buyer for an organization, a club, fraternity, sorority, a church, whatever grouping, corporate as well. All of these different orgs, schools, they buy books in bulk. They buy books for their staff. They buy books for their members. Some organizations buy books for their event attendees. And there are also ways to have your book included in events like swag bags as well. And so this concept is really powerful because you're able to sell the same thing to one person who has access to an audience that might be dozens, hundreds, thousands of people. And it takes the pressure off of trying to sell it to thousands of individuals because you're selling it to a group of people. It also means that you already have a targeted audience that's kind of captive in the sense that whoever is the point person or point people, they know the needs of that group. They understand what it is that they are wanting their people to get out of the experience, out of purchasing your book or things of that sort. You're more so trying to let that one person know or that team of people know, as opposed to trying to convince thousands or hundreds of people that, hey, this is the book for you. And then to me, that's more convenient because instead of trying to convince strangers all over the world to buy your book, now you might have contact with that point person. You can get to know them better. You can understand what those needs are by having conversations and meeting with them, and then also be able to package your items in a way that will be appropriate for their audience. And so this is something that my most recent Pre-Order Profits VIP Day client is doing. He actually happens to be my brother. So we hosted his VIP day about a week ago, and he is working on his book and his pre-order for his upcoming book called Smile When You Poop. And it's about being grateful for the little things in life. I know it has a silly title, but it has a deeper meaning. And so we went through his pre-order process, decided his offer, what he was going to sell, how he was going to package those things. And then we also spent some time looking at corporate options or options for organizations, men's groups, things like that, because he does know that there's a need out there for gratitude in the workplace, gratitude in just our daily lives. And so we developed packages that he can use to sell to corporate. And so for him, he can take some of the same principles, some of the same things that he's using in his individual packages for one-on-one people or group settings, and then apply that to corporate or organizations. And then myself, I've also done this with churches and other organizations. For example, I have 2 books on the Daniel fast, and I have churches that have me come and do cooking demonstrations and then also author visits, and they purchase a copy of my devotional and copies of my cookbook, and they are either able to sell them to their congregation, whereas other churches, they just buy the copies for them and then they give them out first come first serve. And so all of the logistics and things like that, that really depends on the audience. That depends on who is the point person and how the organization is set up. However, the main principle is that being able to sell something to one person or a small group of people, if you have a deciding body that you're trying to get the approval from, is easier in the sense that you are able to understand the issues in a more specific way because you have somebody directly to talk to. Whereas where you're selling individually on Amazon, you likely are not going to know who's buying your book unless you sent them to Amazon or unless a friend or somebody sent them and then they told you about it. So it just is a different angle, and it can have really big rewards because you are able to maximize your marketing instead of just focusing on trying to sell to everybody, whoever appears on your Amazon page. So that's exactly the work that we do inside of the Profitable Publishing Partner Service. It's where I work with you one-on-one to be able to outline, to write your book, and to actually publish it in a way that helps you to be set up properly for sales. Not just having a finished book, but having something that positions you as an expert, that helps you to be able to reach your audience and support their needs. And so if that's something you're interested in learning more about, then you can book a call or sign up for the service at profitablepublishing.com/partner. Now, the third way is to really tap into those speaking gigs. And this can actually be tied to the second option that I shared with bulk book orders, but it doesn't have to be. So speaking gigs could be things where you are coming to speak about a certain topic. This could be in the same categories I mentioned before: corporate, schools, churches, organizations. You would be surprised how many different places people need speakers. And if you're already a speaker, you know this. And if you're already a speaker and you don't have a book, what are we doing? You're missing out on opportunities to sell your book. Or if you haven't positioned your book as a part of your speaking package, you want to reevaluate that. You want to reconsider. And so this is something where you can teach a strategy from your book. Some people decide to take a chapter. Some people take a podcast episode if they're also a podcaster, and they use that as a way to structure their speeches. And then they also package their book inside of their speeches. So some folks will provide X number of copies and then go speak for free. Others will say, okay, this is my speaking fee. These are books that I would love for your audience to have so that they can more deeply understand the work that I'm sharing, and the organization, the corporate space, whoever is the buyer, agrees to buy both of them or agrees to the first option that I shared. And so it just makes it so that people have something tangible that they can take with them and helps them to better understand you. And if it's structured a certain way, you could actually have your books arrive they have before they see you speak. And then that way, maybe they're getting a chance to read a little bit ahead. Of course, you could do it the opposite way where people are able to pick up their books as a part of the event or even afterwards. And so this works for speaking virtually and in person. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that just works for one or the other. And also, autographing your book is a great way to help with this method as well, because people really love autographed copies of books. And you could do that at the event, or you could do it ahead of time, depending upon where you're purchasing your books from and the logistics of getting them into the hands of your audience. And so this is similar to the second option where you're selling your books in bulk, in the sense that this audience is very likely pre-qualified, meaning that they are there for a specific reason. They're there for being a specific group of people and they have similar needs. And so you want to take advantage of that, not in a bad way or an opportunistic way, but you want to capitalize that because it's the perfect opportunity to be able to help those people on a deeper level. Now, that doesn't mean everybody there is going to buy whatever service program, whatever you have on the back end. However, it is a good opportunity to consider selling from the stage. Of course, if it's agreed upon with the event organizer or whoever your point person is, or it could be something where you get them on your email list and then nurture them that way. So typically, one of those two options is usually acceptable to the event host, depending upon what the event is. And there are ways to kind of work around that if the person's not okay or the event coordinator is not okay with doing it in such a not blatant way, but in a way that's so I guess blatant, that's probably the best word. In that way, there are ways to include those things in your book or include little inserts to do it in a way that's more discreet if that's not necessarily the vibe of the event you're going to. So, for example, a couple months ago, I actually was a speaker on a panel at the Media, Faith, and Fear event. And it was hosted by a church, and they had me come and speak about how AI and about how trust in the marketplace and social media and how it changes the effects of marketing. So, like how long it takes people to buy things, and just some shifts that we're noticing, as well as how to support people with navigating the space of understanding that things are shifting. And so at that event, I spoke on a panel, and then also the event host was more than happy to give me a vending table where I could share my own books and people purchase books that way, as well as I spotlighted my clients' books on the my second side of the table. And then doing that allowed me to not only share my books, but also allowed people to see what's possible for them. And a few people reached out about getting some self publishing done for their own books or for their future books. And so that was something that I had three or four different ways that I was able to connect with the people that were there, because people who saw me speak, they connected one way. People who were walking by the table who might not have even attended the event, they still purchased books or were curious about what was going on. And then another way is that I actually connected with somebody named Taria Taylor, and she is the owner of Beyond the Page Media. She reached out to me on Threads before the event because she saw that I was speaking there and said, "Hey, I'm going to be there. Would love to connect with you." And so afterwards, she came up to the table. We talked a little bit, and I think she was the first person I saw that was on Threads that I met in real life. And so that's always fun when you meet people from your socials in person. And then just recently, fast forward a couple months later, recently she actually featured me on her Behind the Book series. And so when you are putting yourself out there, especially in terms of speaking gigs, it is so helpful because you never know where things can kind of lead to the next thing. And so in this episode, we talked about three ways that you can sell your book outside of Amazon. And the first way was to create an experience with your book and not being afraid to just think about all the different cool ways you can do that. And then the second one is to sell your book in bulk. So not selling just one book at a time, but selling tens, thousands, hundreds of books at a time to one buyer or one organization. And then the third one is to get speaking gigs and to put yourself out there, as well as bundle your book with that gig. And so hopefully these have been helpful. If this is something you need support with, then I encourage you to get more information about my Profitable Publishing Partner Service. This is where I work directly with authors to be able to support them with designing a book that helps them to build their brands and also to attract the right audience. If you want more information about that, then visit profitablepublishing.com/partner. Until next time, stay profitable.